Alright, so it is now well established that Aston Martin is F1's surprise of 2023. Unlike Ferrari, the Silverstone-based team was able to translate its performance from the simulator to the track. What Aston Martin has done in the last year is very impressive. Just last season, in the first 4 races of 2022, the AMR 22 was 2 seconds slower than the RB18. This gap has now been cut down to just half a second per lap in the last few races, partly thanks to a better understanding of last year's B-Spec AMR 22 introduced in Barcelona. An improvement of 9/10ths was made over winter, which has positioned the British squad as the nearest challenger to Red Bull, currently faster than the established frontrunners of Mercedes and Ferrari. This performance has mainly been brought by 2 things on the car that Aston Martin has gotten a better understanding of. 3 consecutive podiums put Fernando Alonso 15 points behind Max Verstappen in the standings. In both Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, Alonso was the closest to the Red Bull duo in race pace. Also, if you're enjoying this video, then a sub to the channel would be appreciated. Alonso has recently come out and stated that the most important thing for Aston Martin was to make sure that the performance seen in Bahrain wasn't just a one-off. Seeing that the car was just as fast in both Saudi Arabia and Australia has meant that the team can now shift their focus on bringing upgrades and not spend time trying to understand the car. Knowing that they are faster than Ferrari and can outpace Mercedes means that Aston are now firmly the second fastest team, but barely. In Bahrain, we had an advantage in terms of degradation, while Jeddah showed that the car had a raw pace because we were faster than the others, and this was not because of tyre management. So what was the gap to Red Bull? Looking at the last stint on the hot tyres in Jeddah, the deficit was about 6/10ths per lap, similar to Bahrain. However, it should be noted that Red Bull managed their pace and used very conservative power unit mappings. The Silverstone-based squad has stressed that the AMR 23 is entirely made by Aston Martin and that if anything, the car is more similar to Mercedes in terms of components, since Aston buys the rear of its car from the Silver Arrows. More broadly speaking, Aston cannot deny where much of the aerodynamic concept, including their underbody and front suspension, comes from. In this sense, although the RB19 uses a pull rod front suspension and Aston Martin uses a push rod, the overall geometry in this area is clearly inspired by Red Bull. Regarding aerodynamic stability, the AMR 23's geometry is more relevant than its rod type. Both Aston Martin and Red Bull's front suspensions are very anti-dive, meaning the front arm of the 2 triangles is positioned much higher than at the rear. Ferrari has also tried to be more aggressive with its front suspension, as seen with the SF23's far less conventional design compared to last season. This allows the front suspension to significantly limit the transfer of load to the front, ensuring aerodynamic stability. However, excessive anti-dive has its drawbacks. The main weakness is an inability to absorb bumps, resulting in an instability when braking. The key for Red Bull and Aston Martin is in this area and how they have managed to eliminate the possibility of an instability caused by an aggressive anti-dive front suspension. According to an engineer from a rival team, a very anti-dive front suspension is an important factor in not triggering porpoising, as there is less front-end instability. It is no coincidence that both Red Bull and Aston Martin have not shown any issues with porpoising, even though the 2 cars have 2 completely different rears. The aerodynamic concept of the Aston Martin AMR 23, as previously mentioned, has many similarities to the Red Bull RB18. Red Bull's biggest strength was never its peak downforce level, but instead its ability to maintain a high level of stability with different ground clearances as well as aerodynamic efficiency. Simply put, the RB18 could run higher without losing too much downforce, as opposed to Ferrari and Mercedes, which opted for lower ride heights. The AMR 23 has a rear end with similar characteristics to the RB18, allowing Alonso and Stroll to generate significant downforce levels. However, the Silverstone-made car lacks the aerodynamic efficiency and top speed of Red Bull's RB19. This is where the rears of the 2 cars comes into play. Aston cannot be a copy of the RB18 because their rear end is purchased entirely from Mercedes. The gearbox and rear suspension are the same as those used on the W14. In terms of transmission, There are very important differences between the Red Bull and Mercedes specifications. The Mercedes specification is bulkier in the area closest to the floor, which limits airflow through the AirMar 23's diffuser. This area is designed for a car with ultra-compact bodywork like the W14, as seen with the Mercedes Zero Pods. Having a less efficient diffuser means the AirMar 23 needs more rear wing to compensate, which generates more drag. In the 2 qualifying sessions so far this season, Alonso lost about half a second in the straights, more than 10 km an hour slower in the speed trap compared to the RB19s in Jeddah. This cannot be solved immediately, in part due to the budget cap with Aston Martin choosing to introduce a very similar rear wing in Jeddah compared to Bahrain. Only a slight modification to the AMR 23's DRS flap was introduced in Saudi Arabia, designed to reduce its resistance. Meanwhile, Red Bull has focused solely on aerodynamics when designing the RB19's transmission with an extremely small lower section. This has resulted in some reliability problems with its drive shafts and the transmission, with the team having already mounted 2 power units on both RB19s in the first 2 rounds of the season. This compact size is also made possible by the team's use of the rear pushrod layout. As such, the internal part of the suspension has been moved much higher compared to the classic pull rod used instead by Mercedes and therefore Aston Martin, which has them in the lower part. So do you think Aston will ditch Mercedes for another power unit manufacturer? Let me know in the comments below. Now check out how Ricciardo has a chance to come back to F1 by clicking on this video.